Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror film named A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 3, Dream Warriors. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with a young girl named Chris, staying alone in her room doing crafts. She struggled to stay awake, constantly fiddling with glue. The little house made of popsicle sticks was taking shape with its windows all sealed up, just like the house of Nancy, the main character from the first movie. Finally, her mother returned home and put Chris to bed, urging her to sleep. After saying goodnight, Chris fell asleep, but soon she was awakened by a cold breeze. She got up and saw the gloomy house standing behind her. A child was jumping at the door, humming the familiar nursery rhyme, "Freddy is coming for you. You better lock your door, grab your crucifix, and stay awake." Chris approached the door, and a little girl on the bike greeted her. Before they could exchange many words, a noise came from a distance. The girl turned her head and went into the house. Worried about her safety, Chris hurriedly followed. Inside, it was dark. She went down to the basement, where the little girl rode her bike towards her, telling her this was the place where Freddy brought them. It seemed to be the boiler room, where he kept the kidnapped children. However, the outside of the house looked just like Nancy's home. As Chris was about to take the girl and leave, the furnace behind them suddenly ignited with blazing flames. She picked up the girl and rushed out, but before she could escape the basement, the floor turned into a swamp. The moment Freddy caught up, Chris pulled her feet out and ran upstairs. She then collided with a corpse. Looking around, the room was filled with corpses, all killed by Freddy. The girl asked Chris to put her down, and when she looked down, the girl had turned into a skeleton. Chris suddenly woke up from the nightmare. After gaining senses, she went to wash her face. Suddenly, the faucet clamped her hand, and Freddy appeared in the mirror to flex his demonic figure. The other faucet turned into a steel claw and stabbed her, causing her to scream in a chicken voice. Her mother burst through the door to check where the chicken was, but Chris woke up again. Although everything had happened in her dream, it looked as if she had cut herself. The scene shifts to the town's hospital, where many teenagers plagued by nightmares have been admitted recently. Neil, the head of the psychiatric department, first met Chris when the girl was going berserk in the examination room, even injuring a nurse. Neil tried to calm her down, but she kept holding a scalpel, crying and singing Freddy's nursery rhyme, not letting anyone approach her. Unexpectedly, when the new intern, Nancy, arrived and continued singing the rhyme, Chris put down the knife and embraced her because the two shared similar experiences. It turns out Nancy was the only survivor of the Freddy incident, and after 7 years, she was now a medical graduate student, making breakthrough research on nightmares at a young age. The health department specifically assigned her to assist the doctors. After things temporarily settled down, Neil asked Nancy about the nursery rhyme. Perhaps due to her bizarre experience, Nancy didn't reveal the truth. Neil noticed Nancy taking a medication called dream suppressant. He looked it up online and found that this experimental drug had the effect of suppressing dreams. The next day, Nancy was assigned to the group therapy area, where the children residing there suffered from nightmares and had a history of self-harm. That night, Chris was alone in her room, drawing, but she fell asleep due to her lack of rest. Soon, a small tricycle, smeared with blood, entered the room, but the little girl was nowhere to be seen. Chris was alarmed and quickly left, sticking to the wall. The tricycle seemed to have been exposed to extreme heat, melting before her eyes. Piercing wails filled the air, and Chris was petrified. The door in front of her suddenly closed, trapping her inside the house. On the dining table on the first floor, there was a roast piglet. The girl stared at her without moving, and the piglet suddenly stood up and screamed, scaring her into running upstairs. The carpet was soaked with blood, and a huge creature pierced through the floor and burrowed into the wall. Chris screamed and stared at it without letting her guard down. The creature circled around and suddenly disappeared. As she nervously scanned the room, a giant snake emerged from under her feet, knocking her to the ground. With its mouth wide open, it prepared to swallow her whole, including her smelly part. In panic, Chris screamed Nancy's name. On the other side, Nancy woke up instantly. She looked at the toy house she had brought from Chris' home, as if she could hear the girl calling her. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness struck, and she fell into the chair, landing directly into Chris' dream. The giant snake was about to swallow Chris when Nancy picked up a shard of glass and stabbed it fiercely. Chris was finally saved. As the snake rose, Freddy's face was revealed. Recognizing Nancy, she instructed Chris to take her out. The girl covered her head, and both of them returned to reality. The next day, Nancy found Chris while holding the small toy house and asked if she had ever brought others into her dreams before. It turned out that this was not the first time Chris had done this. Since she was 3 years old, she would bring her father into her dreams to protect herself. Her father always thought he was dreaming, and after her parents divorced, she never tried it again. During the group therapy time, the doctor gathered all the teenagers together, believing they were suffering from mass hysteria. However, it can't explain why these children dreamed of the same killer even before they met each other. In the therapy session, a female doctor suggested that their abnormal behavior stemmed from psychological trauma or moral conflict. But the teenagers had long lost hope in the doctors and had their own methods to resist the nightmares. Every night, the wheelchair-bound boy and the mute boy in the same room would take turns staying awake. If the sleeping person made any movement, the one on watch would wake them up immediately. The arrival of Chris and Nancy once again provoked Freddy's attacks. He possessed a boy's doll, and when the boy woke up from his dream, Freddy was already approaching him. He severed the boy's tendons, treating him like a marionette, and led him out of the room. The roommate couldn't see the scene in his dream and assumed the boy was sleepwalking, glancing at him and falling back asleep. After Freddy had his fill playing with the boy on the rooftop, he cut all 4 tendons, and the boy fell, never waking up again. After the incident, the doctors gathered everyone together again. They still insisted that it was a case of self-termination and refused to listen to the children's protests. The female doctor insisted on prescribing sleeping pills for them. Fortunately, the day before, Nancy had talked to Neil, and although he didn't understand what was going on, he chose to believe Nancy and prescribed the children the dream suppressant medication instead. The next night, the girl, who had always dreamed of being an actress, was afraid to sleep and insisted on staying up all night in the TV room. Given the accident that had occurred in the hospital the night before, the caregiver reluctantly let her stay. Unexpectedly, after the girl had dozed off a few times, Freddy's shadow suddenly appeared on the TV screen, followed by a scrambled picture. The girl tried changing channels, but to no avail. As she raised her hand to hit the TV, Freddy's claws violently burst from the casing, his head also emerging through the plastic, and he shoved the girl into the screen like an adult toy. Not long after, Neil attended the girl's funeral, unable to comprehend what had happened to these children. As he mourned, a nun suddenly appeared beside him. The nun introduced herself and told Neil that to save the children, the restless spirit must be laid to rest. Neil was confused, and before he could ask more, Nancy came over. When he looked back, the nun had disappeared. After spending some time together, Nancy and Neil grew closer. With 2 people now lost to the hospital, Nancy finally revealed the truth. She then introduced the children to Freddy's identity. Moreover, Nancy was convinced that these kids in the room were the last descendants of the parents who had burned Freddy alive. That's why Freddy came here to seek revenge. Nancy took the children into Chris' dreamscape. They were delighted to discover that they had extraordinary abilities in their dreams. Unbeknownst to everyone, a person was missing from the group. The mute boy had secretly admired a nurse for a long time, and today she invited him to play with her. The boy didn't expect that and happily accepted her kiss. Little did he know, as they tongue massaged each other, the nurse's tongue grew longer and snaky. She spat out 2 long tongues, tying the boy to the bed. When Freddy materialized, the area under the bed had transformed into a large pit of fire, with intense flames scorching the boy. Chris could sense that Freddy was nearby. It was then that Neil noticed the mute boy was missing. He wanted to go out and save him, but the doorknob was burning hot, and even the walls began to emit heat. Just as the room seemed about to be engulfed in flames, the female doctor forcefully opened the door and woke everyone up. The mute boy lay motionless on the ground, trapped in a deep coma and unable to wake up. As they were at a loss for what to do, Neil happened to see the nun standing on the attic balcony, looking around. He shouted out to her, but she didn't respond. He ran up to see what was going on, and it seemed as if the nun was waiting for him. After seeing Neil, she revealed the truth behind everything. It's revealed that this building had been abandoned for a long time, and this room was the source of the evil. A long time ago, a young female worker was accidentally locked in here, and the patients hit her, repeatedly assaulting her. By the time people discovered the woman, she was on the brink of death, and she was pregnant with a child, Freddy. He inherited the genes of assaulting madmen, which was why he was so crazed. The nun told Neil that the only way to deal with Freddy was to take his remains to a sacred place for cremation. After saying this, the nun disappeared. At this moment, Nancy asked Freddy to let the mute boy go, but Freddy not only heard her, but he also wrote a message on the boy's body, challenging her to save the boy. That night, Neil sought Nancy's help. In the past, Nancy's father had participated in the event of burning Freddy, and only he knew the whereabouts of the remains. However, when the two found him at a bar, the man was unwilling to disclose the location. He had lost his wife because of this man and didn't want to get involved again. Just then, Neil received a call from the hospital. Chris had lost control of her emotions and was locked in an isolation room by the female doctor who had injected her with a sedative. The children feared that Freddy would take advantage of the situation and could only seek Neil's help. Neil asked Nancy to save the others while he went to find the remains. The two decided to split up and act separately. Neil confronted Nancy's father, demanding he take him to find the remains. As they passed a church, Neil secretly took a bottle of holy water and a crucifix. Soon after, Nancy's father led Neil to an abandoned car factory, knowing the remains were there, but not the exact location. Meanwhile, Nancy returned to the hospital. The nursing staff wouldn't allow her to see Chris in the isolation room, so she made the excuse of saying goodbye to the children and gathered the remaining ones together. Under her guidance, the children imagined themselves in the isolation room and fell into a deep sleep one after another. Chris seemed to have a premonition and met with her companions in their shared dream. Before they could rejoice, Freddy's steel claws suddenly appeared, slashing back and forth, and feathers filled the room. The children couldn't see each other and screamed for Nancy's help. In a daze, Chris suddenly found herself back in the same scene and dialogue from the night she first saw Freddy. Her mother's new boyfriend was heard from downstairs, and Chris pleaded with her mother not to leave her. As her words fell, her mother was yanked out of the doorway, and Freddy emerged, slashing off the woman's head with one swipe. He dangled the trophy in front of Chris, who backed away in panic and then jumped out of the window. She then shouted for Nancy in despair. The scene shifted to another girl who became a bad girl in her dream as she had wished. Armed with two knives, she anxiously awaited Freddy's appearance. Soon, Freddy appeared in black, and the girl took the first move, quickly cornering him. Unexpectedly, Freddy's hands suddenly turned into several needles and jabbed at her arms. Elsewhere, the boy in the wheelchair was no longer paralyzed in his dream. He shouted the names of his companions, and Freddy knocked him down with the wheelchair. As he lay on the ground, he suddenly remembered that he was a wizard in his dream, so he chanted a spell and sent a light wave towards Freddy. However, as he rushed over, Freddy grabbed him in midair. Freddy claimed he didn't believe in fairy tales and quickly finished off the boy. Meanwhile, Chris met up with Nancy and another companion. The three couldn't summon Freddy, no matter how hard they tried. Just as they were unsure what to do, an iron door appeared before them, with the familiar boiler room behind it. Flames flickered beneath the staircase, and they ventured down together, finally finding the mute boy on the lowest level. Freddy, crazed and showing off his prey, slit the boy's tongue and threw him in. Fortunately, Nancy was quick to react, grabbing the boy's hands while her companion helped her save him. Seeing that Freddy was about to hurt Chris, the other companion drew a steel rod to stab him. Everyone thought Freddy would disappear, but instead, he slowly pulled out the rod, seemingly unharmed. He lifted his shirt to reveal several faces on his stomach, boasting that these victims made him stronger. The scene shifted to the abandoned car factory, where Nancy's father led Neil to Freddy's old car. Neil pried open the hood and found the remains as he had hoped. Before they could take it away, the car suddenly started and Freddy's skeleton ran out, charging straight at Neil. Nancy's father charged at the skeleton with a pitchfork, but was instead lifted by the skeleton and impaled on an iron rack behind him. From a distance, Neil screamed in horror as the skeleton knocked him down with a few blows, and then with a sinister laugh, it dispersed into a pile of bones. On the other hand, Nancy and the others were trapped in a room full of mirrors. The mute boy, witnessing his friends being dragged into the mirrors, finally shouted "no" angrily, which surprisingly caused Freddy to vanish temporarily. The group embraced each other in celebration. Nancy's father suddenly appeared at the door, having crossed boundaries just to apologize to his daughter. After so many years, the father and daughter finally reconciled, and Nancy tightly hugged her dad. Unbeknownst to her, the person in her arms turned into Freddy and stabbed her with a knife. Accompanied by Nancy's wails, Neil woke up from his unconscious state. Calling Nancy's name, he struggled to crawl out of a deep pit and pushed Freddy's skeleton into it. As he sprinkled holy water, Freddy disappeared on the other side as well. Holding Nancy's lifeless body, Chris wept in tears, unable to bring her back. The story concluded at Nancy's funeral. In a daze, Neil felt the presence of the nun once again. Following his intuition, he discovered the nun's gravestone, which surprisingly bore the name of Freddy's mother. It turned out that she had guided Neil to defeat her psycho son, Freddy. As Neil slept, a light suddenly lit up in the toy house, indicating that Freddy hadn't completely vanished. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.